Hello, this is Rachel from 7 and All. Today I'm going to be talking about homeschool mistakes and specifically some of the mistakes I've made or regrets I've had in building my homeschool library. Now I am specifically addressing homeschool library building mistakes because as a homeschooler, your homeschool resource library, your home library, is an incredibly important tool for your homeschool. This is a great big job. This is a great big endeavor we are embarking on, and it definitely helps to have quality tools to help us get the job done. In this video, I'm going to share 3 mistakes that retrospectively I can see that I made in the beginning years of building my own homeschool resource library for my family. And share with me in the comments down below. Do you have any regrets on some of your resource purchases or just in the approach that you've taken? And how have you adapted to meet the needs of your family's homeschool? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to share my top 3. Number 1, the big mistake I made was buying the books that were the cheapest instead of the books I actually wanted. I love books. I've always loved books my whole life. I have just been one of those book people. However, that does not actually mean that I love all books. There are many books that I love, that I savor the deliciousness of every time I read them. And there are many other books that I have zero desire to read or to reread. Books are not all created equal. In my earliest days when I just had toddlers and I was beginning to shop with the idea of building a home library, building this library so that my children can grow up surrounded by good books and have all of this literary input and rich language available to them, I was really shopping with best prices in mind. I would go on Book Outlet and I would search, okay, what Spanish books are $1.99 or $2.99? And I would go on thrift books, or I'd visit thrift stores when I had a chance to and try to get the 50-cent books there. I knew I wanted books as a resource for my family and for my homeschool. I knew I wanted to read books to my kids. I was reading dozens of books a day to them. And I wanted to get the best bang for my buck because I didn't have unlimited money. So I had this idea that, well, if I got really cheap books, I could get more of them and more would be better because I had very few children's books when I was first starting out. As the years have passed and I have read hundreds of children's books, I have learned a lot about what appeals to me and to my family in a book and what types of books my family gets a lot of use out of. So for me, I have really shifted in my thinking toward, I usually do have a list of books I would like to get at some point. So when I have book buying money, I will lean towards buying the books that I know that I need for school, or the books that I know I want, the books I know we will get a lot of use out of, versus just being like, oh, this book is cheap, let me get this book. Because some of our books, although I got them very inexpensively, they still weren't worth it because they just weren't great books or they weren't a great fit for our family. Now, this isn't to say that all of those cheap books were total losses. Actually, kind of just buying books I didn't know much about because they were cheap has been a win on several occasions. I have talked multiple times about the Math Start series of books on my channel, and I got these specifically because I found them on Book Outlet and they were very, very inexpensive. Several of them are in Spanish. And so I'm like, okay, great, educational resource. I didn't know much about this series, but what I have discovered is that my sons love these books and we read them so many times. I did not actually expect a picture book series about math to be as popular in my family as it is, but these were so great. So I'm not saying that I will never just experiment and take a flyer on very inexpensive books, because I'm sure there are authors and there are series and there are news stories that I have not discovered yet. So sometimes those inexpensive books can be a good way to, get out of your comfort zone, try something new. But my priority very much going forward is, if I have $10 to spend on a book, I'd rather spend the $10 on a book that I know that I want, that I know I will use, that I know that I need, that I know I can use in multiple different ways. And it is a more expensive book, the $10 book, versus, taking that $10 and spending it on 5 $2 books that are cheaper. So that's my first big lesson and my big takeaway for all of you guys which is that the price is actually not really the most important factor in a book. Doesn't mean a more expensive book is going to be better, but it might mean that a better book just so happens to be more expensive this time, and it still might be a better value for your family. Second mistake I made when building my homeschool library was just blindly purchasing books because they were on the book list of the curriculum that I knew I wanted to use. So I have a very literature-based homeschool. I have used literature-based curriculums. I've used Gentle and Classical for several years. I've used Sunlight. I have used Beautiful Feet books. And with all of those curriculums, in these early years, I'm going to America, I'm having a chance to quickly buy books. I just go through the book list, try to get all the books I can. Then I get home and I'm actually reading them and I'm actually using them and realizing, not all the time, not all the time by any means, but getting to a book where I'm reading it and I'm like, I would not have chosen this. I do not like this book. This book was not actually that worth it for me. So with time and more confidence and more experience, I'm still using literature-based curriculum. So nowadays I feel totally free to, as I'm going through the book list and I come across a book that maybe it is really expensive, maybe it's really hard to find, or maybe I just already know from my own experience, I don't particularly jive with that series, that author, that style, or that style is going to be too difficult for my kids at their stage. I feel totally comfortable just subbing it in with a totally different book. So I actually did this with Gentle and Classical Nature, and I learned from this the first time. When I used Gentle and Classical Nature 1, they had us use Nature Anatomy by Julia Rothman as one of the spines. And, maybe it's me, maybe it was the age of my kids at that time, who they were preschoolers. We loved Gentle and Classical Nature 1. I did not like that book. We didn't get much use out of it. It wasn't really worth it to me. So then when we did Gentle and Classical Nature Volume 2, which was on oceans, I didn't get the Julia Rothman Ocean Anatomy. I got a different DK Ocean Spine that we really did love and that we really jived with. And yeah, it's a little extra work to switch out page numbers and find the topic in a different book, but it was very doable for me and much more worthwhile to have a book that I could get more use out of. And I am not trying to pick on any one curriculum here. I think this is a principle that all homeschool parents should just kind of be aware of with literature-based curriculums is, hey, it's very possible that you might see a need to adapt the book list to meet your family's needs and preferences. For example, when we did Beautiful Feet books around the world, this was one of the books on the book list for China, Minglo Moves the Mountain. Now, Arnold Lobel has fantastic series of early readers. I enjoy so many of his books. This is not a book that I would pick personally for learning about China. When the goal of the curriculum was to learn about China, there are just a lot of better picture books that will actually help you to learn a lot more about China than this one. So that's my own angle coming to a curriculum, coming to a book list. I'm coming to those book lists with a lot more confidence now of, hey, if I want to use this curriculum to learn about a country, I actually am going to choose a picture book that will help us to learn about the country. So my second takeaway from my mistake that I made is don't feel that you just have to, this is the book that, even on my curriculum, this is the book Rachel put on her book list, so I must track down this exact book. Hey, feel free to sub it in with something else if it's hard to find, if it's too expensive, or if you're like, I'm just not that into that book. I'd rather do this different book that I already have, or this book by an author I already know I like. Feel free to do that. Then number 3 mistake I made, and this one is much more specific to bilingual homeschooling, to raising my boys bilingual and speaking Spanish. I was starting from absolutely zero with a Spanish library. At least I had I did have some more experience with children's books in English. I was starting from zero, zilch, nada when it came to children's books in Spanish. So I listened to the advice of others, which today, there is a big movement toward own voices type of literature. So if we're going to read Spanish picture books, we want to read authentic Spanish picture books written by, authentic Spanish speakers, people from Latin American countries, people from Spain, and focus more on that type of literature versus on translated literature or just translated books that don't have a connection to Hispanic culture. So I listened to that advice and I did that. So when I started buying Spanish books and tracking them down, I was looking at different book lists, like the book list from Beautiful Mundo, and I was buying books like this one. Let's see. Let's take a little look inside. Oso Quiere Volar. Quite a long book. Quite a few words. I was buying books like this one, Soñadores by Yuyi Morales, which is a mother and child immigration story, very poetic, dreamy. This is Alma Florada, who we have a lot of books by Alma Florada. Very prolific writer for children. This is The Lizard and the Sun, and it is a folktale, also rather dense and long. Then Doña Flor by Pat Mora. This is also a folktale. Nice, lot of words on the page. And yeah, these are authentic books. They are folktales. There's some dealing with the immigration experience. There's a lot of rich language. But hold on a second. I'm definitely an English dominant speaker. My children are English dominant. And when I was getting these books, they were about 2 and 4 years old. So can we start to guess what the problem is? In English, I'm reading them books like Elephant and Piggy, and If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And then in Spanish, I'm reading them books about, poetic, emotional immigration experiences or folktales. And is it any wonder that they don't seem to love their Spanish books as much and that they don't seem to be connecting with them as much? Because I'm taking a language that they're already not quite as comfortable in. And then for some reason, we're ending up doing harder, more difficult books. Because yes, I have nothing against any of these books. As my kids are getting older, I am actually seeing them much more even now at a stage where they could enjoy these and connect with these much better. And, I'm thinking even in another year or two, it's gonna be better and more age appropriate. But I was realizing the mistake I had made was that all of our fun books were in English, and all of our Spanish books tended to be a lot more serious, a lot more wordy, all that rich language, but I have preschoolers. So I've actually learned to make a shift, and we've made a shift toward, hey, no, I do want to encourage more fun books, even if they aren't authentic, even if they are translated, shorter, easier books. So we love the Elephant and Piggy books in Spanish. These are great, so much conversational vocabulary. No, is it as poetic and literary as Doña Flor? No. But this my kids actually want to read, and this one they want to read dozens of times, and this one they're going to be able to read for themselves very soon. My oldest is already at a stage where he can read this for himself, and he can have that familiarity and that repetition. It's going to be a while. So making the shift towards allowing us to have books in Spanish that are not necessarily that authentic, serious, culturally connected, but just simply books and stories, because little kids like to have fun. They don't necessarily care that everything is culturally authentic, They want to read a story about a grumpy crab on the beach, and this one's a big hit too. Eric Carle's La Semillita, they're less wordy. This one is a nice mix. Gracias, Omu. This one is not wordy. It's not too complicated. Well, there's a couple pages with more words, but it's not an insanely long story. It's a very vivid and easy to understand type of story. And this. So this one is more for my bilingual homeschooling mom friends. Also remember, especially when you have little kids and in language learning with older kids too, your books don't always have to be so serious. This is much, much less intimidating than this. And with little kids, they're going to be more motivated and more able to connect with this than with this. There will be time. We're going to get here. I have very much faith that we are going to get here. Probably in 1-2 years, we're going to be reading this and really connecting with it a lot more because we've laid the foundation through the simpler books. But you can't get ahead of yourself. And that's really what I did. I listened to all the advice of, okay, authentic, folk tales, culturally relevant books, when I should have really been just aiming for fun little kid books, because kids just like fun little kid books, whatever the language is. All right, those are my 3 big mistakes I have made in building my homeschool library. Let me know your thoughts and your comments down below, and I'll see you next time for more nerdy homeschool videos. Bye!